When you're giving a new piece of media a chance, it has one chance to make a good impression on you. Generally speaking, most people know pretty quickly whether or not something is for them, depending on what it is they're trying to gauge. With music, it's the first 10 to 15 seconds. With a book, it's a combination of the title, cover art, and summary on the back. And for television, in this case anime, it's typically the first episode in its entirety. The window of time something has to leave an impression on its audience varies from person to person, but it's often in the ballpark of what I've said. Despite being absurdly brief windows of time, creators know it's up to them to utilize those fleeting moments to the best of their ability to elicit a sense of curiosity or resonance. I've got to admit, I'm incredibly picky about anime. Not because I'm an elitist or anything, I just have a solid understanding of the kinds of stories, tones, and art styles I like. That's not to say I never stray outside of those parameters, because I have on several occasions. Those outliers gained my attention because of the promise of what was to come when their pilot episodes concluded. That's essentially what a pilot episode is, a promise that your time won't be wasted if it's invested. An anime can have an incredible story down the line, but if the pilot fails to intrigue me enough to keep going, then it doesn't matter how dense the world is with lore, or how good the character development is. If the pilot episode fails, I'm moving on to something else. I think that's why I have such a fondness for the series opener for Yu Yu Hakusho. As far as anime goes, even by today's standards, it checks all the boxes in terms of what it needs to do in order to retain viewers. But what are some of those boxes that good pilots tick off? As with plenty of things, that's mostly subjective, but I'll see if I can at least give you insight into what I think makes for a successful debut. First, and most obviously, we need to establish the world and its key players, or at the very least, the key players at that point in the story. If we're to connect with the story, we need to know who we're rallying behind, right? Yu Yu Hakusho wastes no time crossing this off the list alongside another criteria we'll discuss momentarily. We're immediately introduced to Yusuke Urameshi, and shortly after the opening, we're shown what his character is like under normal circumstances. He's cocky, rebellious, sarcastic, and can hold his own in a fight. The episode goes to painstaking lengths to show us that even though he's our protagonist, Yusuke is kind of an asshole, and that's immensely important. We're also introduced to Keiko, his childhood friend that is smart, has a strong moral compass, and can handle her own against Yusuke's juvenile antics. The show also uses Keiko to establish that other students are afraid of Yusuke, though we do get to see that in action soon after. Kazuma Kuwabara is introduced as something of a buffoon that sees Yusuke as a rival, and it's easy to discern that he's also a bit of a delinquent. Then, we're introduced to Yusuke's principal, Takanaka, and his mother, who are admittedly bit characters, but their roles in this particular episode can't go understated. The principal is perhaps the only teacher that sees a sliver of potential in Yusuke and doesn't use every available opportunity to belittle or berate him. Yusuke's mother is a lush who seems mostly dismissive of her son, even in the face of him skipping school. There's also Botan, whose sunny personality and giggly nature seems to clash hard with Yusuke's combative disposition. At this point in the story, the world is mostly 90s Japan as we know it, so there's no extra lore that really needs to be vomited on the audience in the form of exposition. With that, we've checked off our first box. The second thing the pilot needs is a sense of intrigue to make the audience pay attention. That can come in one or more of many forms, but it's often in the form of a question posed to the audience. It's rarely explicitly stated, often communicated through visuals or the events of the pilot. In Yu Yu Hakusho's case, the question comes at the very beginning of the show: how and why did Yusuke die? The show front-loads the question and then uses a large chunk of the episode to set the stage for its answer. That's why it's so important to show Yusuke being such a jerk, because it made his death more impactful for the audience and justified Botan's appearance. We're shown that Yusuke isn't just some one-note prick, but that he can be funny, protective, and generally compassionate for others when given the chance. He sees a kid playing by the street and warns him, albeit aggressively, how dangerous that is. When he can tell he startled the kid, he stops to make the kid laugh, despite how ridiculous he looks to others passing by. It conveys to the audience that the jerk we were introduced to has layers to him. Things kick into high gear when the kid's ball goes into the road, and naturally, the kid goes to get it right as a car comes speeding through. Yusuke ends up throwing himself in the way to save the kid, and poof, we've cycled back to the beginning of the episode. So that's 2 boxes checked off the list. The third thing on the list is honestly not as crucial for most people, and plenty of pilot episodes have done just fine without it. However, if an anime's initial episode manages to check this box, it really makes me perk up and take notice. That thing is heart, or a genuine emotional connection to the character's cause. This one is rare and often difficult to pull off, as a character's cause generally comes a few episodes in. Not to mention, it's nearly impossible to connect to a character you know nothing about on an emotional level. A recent example of this cause and connection done well is the pilot episode of Demon Slayer, but Yu Yu Hakusho knocks this aspect of the equation out of the park. It was the reason the show made sure you could see what a dickhead Yusuke was, as well as how his peers and the adults in his life reacted to his presence. It was laying the groundwork for one of the series' biggest gut punches. See, after Yusuke's death, we're shown more of his compassion as he takes Botan up on an offer to go check on the boy he gave his life for. He's genuinely happy to see the kid is okay, further cementing there's more to Yusuke than even he seems to think. Once he knows the kid is fine, he says he has no regrets and is ready for Botan to take him to hell or wherever he thinks he's going. But Botan tells him she's there to offer him his life back because literally no one in the spirit world expected him to die that day, certainly not via self-sacrifice. Most people would jump at the prospect of resurrection, but Yusuke initially decides against it, saying that everyone in his life will be much happier without him. Botan gives Yusuke the opportunity to spectate at his own wake after he declines, and this scene is genuinely so heartbreaking with the context of the episode in mind. When Yusuke arrives and sees tons of his classmates there laughing, he assumes they're happy he's dead. But then we see Keiko having an absolute meltdown, much to Yusuke's surprise. The next to show up is Kuwabara, who is also devastated by Yusuke's death and again leaves Yusuke stunned by his mourning. The third to pay their respects is Yusuke's principal Takanaka, who chastises two other teachers for being pieces of human trash. He has a few words for Yusuke, lamenting the fact that Yusuke died before he could make something out of himself the way Takanaka knew he was capable of. Then the music kicks in. Oh god, the music!
Why didn't you stay? You could have made something great out of yourself.
Yusuke's mother simply has a breakdown, but that's more than enough to tug on your heartstrings even further. The final person to pay their respects is the little kid Yusuke saved and his mother. The kid thanks Yusuke for saving him and making faces. What really delivers the gut punch though is the small exchange the kid has with his mother as they're leaving Yusuke's wake. Simply telling you about it won't do it the justice it deserves, so just take a listen.
Mommy, do you think it'd be okay if I played with that boy tomorrow? If I'm good?
No, son.
I know some people sounded angry at him, but he's really nice. He made really funny faces at me too, and he got me my ball. I don't know why those people were crying like that. It was probably because they wanted to play with him too.
Oh.
If you don't at the very least get teary-eyed during this scene, you're a complete monster. I've seen this show start to finish an egregious number of times, and this moment still gets me. It's a moment that hits uncomfortably hard if you've ever lost anyone close to you. The entire setup for Yusuke's personality alongside the other characters was for this scene. Without the previous characterization, this scene wouldn't have had any weight to it. Once the scene is over, you're emotionally invested in Yusuke and the people around him, which leads to the final box that needs to be checked off on our list. Questions for the future are what really cement an individual's desire to press onward and discover what comes next. This episode ends with Yusuke realizing that his life had meaning to those around him that he often took for granted. He goes on to accept Botan's offer to undergo an ordeal in order to gain his life back, and it leaves the audience wondering what that ordeal is, how he'll overcome it, what life will be like if he makes it back, how he'll change emotionally, and so on. What's even more stunning about the pilot is that the audience's curiosity is piqued without an understanding of the full scope of what Yu Yu Hakusho's story has to offer. You get lured in emotionally, left with questions you genuinely want to know the answers to, and then little by little the world opens up. That's what makes this episode so special to me. You're not thrown into a world where you need to take in a ton of information super fast, or wrap your head around a complex magic system, or smacked in the face by the big bad. You're given a singular, character-driven episode designed to ease you into a much more intriguing world. The entire episode is in service of helping you get to know Yusuke while he connects to his feelings, and getting glimpses of why he behaves the way he does. From start to finish, the pilot is one complete emotional arc. There's a concise simplicity to it that I think most anime lack these days. If you haven't seen Yu Yu Hakusho, I can't recommend it highly enough. Even if you're not interested in what it has to offer overall, you should really check out the first episode. It gives you real insight into what you should look for in a pilot episode for an anime. What's your favorite anime pilot episode and why? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, thanks for watching.